Alright everyone, no intro today, and if you've been on my channel before, you likely can tell why that is. We just have some stuff that is very serious, and I wanted to cover it as soon as possible because I didn't know who else on YouTube was going to be covering it, so please forgive me for once again talking about a serious topic. I promise I'm trying to get away from stuff like this, but I'll go ahead and say it. The reason why I'm making this video is because Libs of TikTok is now directly attacking the BDSM community. If you've been living under a rock and you have a blessed ignorance of who Libs of TikTok is, please turn back now, preserve your sanity. But for those of you who maybe kind of recognize the name and are like, oh, I don't quite know who that is though, let me go ahead and give you a quick refresher. Libs of TikTok is a social media handle used by Chaya Raichik. Raichik, who used to work in the real estate industry, started posting under this account name in early 2021. A little over a year later, journalist Taylor Lorenz was the first to reveal that Raichik was behind the account, who up to this point had been posting anonymously. The outrage this sparked is an entirely different story. I want to recognize it's there, but I'll just leave it at that. Do your own research if you want to. Libs of TikTok, though, started as something of a reply guy account, commenting under the posts of famous conservative Twitter users. Raichik eventually pivoted to being a content curator herself, promising her conservative audience a good daily dose of liberal cringe. The account's notoriety only grew from there. After this pivot, she then ended up being promoted by people like Joe Rogan and even Donald Trump himself. So you can see even just from early on, she had quite a lot of influence. The typical Libs of TikTok post harkens back to the anti-feminist era of the 2010s. As you might guess from the name, she typically features liberal-seeming people from TikTok and other platforms, often with the kind of colored hair, pronouns, and way of dressing that makes certain conservatives seethe with rage. One form of content that has done particularly well for Raichik is attacking teachers in schools. For example, going after openly queer teachers, teachers with too many rainbows in their classrooms, or school staff who support their queer students. She also promoted the now infamous hoax that schools were putting litter boxes in student bathrooms for kids who identified as cats. This is a rumor along the lines of the trans cat and trans dog narrative that folks like Blair White have been spinning for years. Like, no, they don't think that they're a trans dog, they're just kinky. But in this particular case, the truth is a little dark. Litter was provided at some schools as part of emergency preparedness kits in the event of a lockdown. Yeah, at the most, the events support that there may have been litter boxes placed in bathrooms as a prank, rather than being a routine part of school policy as a way to accept trans cat students, which again, there is no evidence that people like that exist and were in high school and attending these schools. At best, though, Libs of TikTok routinely doxes and publicly harasses otherwise private citizens posting on their social media accounts. Her posts are amplified exponentially by the larger conservative ecosystem who use her posts to stoke fears about things like the trans epidemic or people trying to turn your children gay. They encourage parents to distrust schools, request that books be removed from classrooms and libraries, and in particular, they seem hell-bent on removing any and all sex ed from schools. This is especially concerning since we know that comprehensive, science-based sex ed not only lowers teen pregnancy and STI rates, but also reduces the rates of sexual violence. It's also something that helps many children every year realize that they are being violated by trusted adults or older children. One well-known tactic of abusers is to limit a child's access to information, and they often try to prevent teaching the child about what sex is for as long as possible. Proposing that we remove all sex ed from schools simply means that more children will be harmed for longer by those who are supposed to love them and take care of them. And hearing this to me was really hard to grapple with. It's difficult to believe that someone could be so flippantly against something with such demonstrable benefits, but Raichik has no problem saying this with her own mouth.
I went to public school, and we had a sex ed class in public school where we were shown, information about sexual health and, sex and masturbation and things like that. I'm curious about your own education. I mean, was that something did you ever go to a sex ed class, or is this all sort of new to you where you're sort of learning about how this works in public schools?
I don't live under a rock.
So you did have sex ed classes when you were growing up?
We had some kind of education, yeah.
So you do think it's important for children to have education, sex education?
Not the way they're doing it in public school.
How are they doing it?
They're giving kids porn and telling third graders that they should masturbate. They're giving middle school children guides to gay sex and anal sex, sex toys.
How would you describe the type of sex education that you'd like to see in schools?
At this point, I want all sex education actually removed from schools because I don't trust the schools to do it.
Okay.
After what we've seen, I don't trust them at all.
At worst, if you can believe that there's a worst, her posts have led to bomb threats at schools and hospitals. Raichik was recently appointed to Oklahoma's Library Media Advisory Committee, supposedly to enlist her help in fighting woke indoctrination in schools. A month later, a trans teenager named Nex Benedict was killed after being assaulted in a school bathroom. This school was previously targeted by Raichik and her followers in 2022, ultimately leading to the resignation of a teacher. Some have implicated Raichik in Nex's death, stating that she, quote, has blood on her hands, and that her appointment to this organization in Oklahoma emboldened the student body with an existing bullying problem to act even farther. So, you kind of get the point by now. I'm not going to belabor it. Libs of TikTok is, generally speaking, and this is the lightest way I can phrase this, is bad news. She uses her platform, and by extension, her connections with the larger conservative landscape, to stir up hatred in the hearts of millions of people in America. Most often, this hatred is directed at specific individuals, ranging from drag queens to queer teachers to doctors. She's more than happy to spread misinformation so long as it supports her narrative. The ultimate purpose of this is to stop sex ed in schools, stop young queer people from discovering what their identities are, and to counteract public acceptance of so-called deviant behavior at large, even when the people doing this so-called deviant behavior are adults. Now, I don't want to sound conspiratorial, but I had a sneaking feeling that eventually Libs of TikTok, being the shark that she is, would move closer to our waters in the kink community. The writing has been on the wall for a long time. Tim Pool and Blair White have had open disdain for kinky queer folk for years. They use each to paint the other with tar. They imply that openly queer sexuality is implicitly kinky and thus deviant and perverse. And they also argue that kink is bad by tying it to queer sexuality. It's wrong because it's queer. They see both kink and queerness as inherently sexual things, and thus profane and meant to be removed from the public eye. Think back to years past when kink at Pride was a common topic of debate. Even a couple years ago, many left-leaning and liberal folks without proper knowledge or context were taken in by arguments made by conservatives against even the most banal displays of kink gear. No one should be wearing leather at pride parades because seeing too many belts might make sensitive eyes burn, that kind of thing. They didn't really even seem to know what people were talking about or what they were really asking for. Never mind what people see all the time in superhero movies or comics or professional wrestling or Halloween costumes or cartoons. No. Leather in public on somebody is a step too far. It's the sort of logic that leads someone to saying that, if your partner gets turned on by sandals, you shouldn't wear sandals in public because that's exposing non-consenting people to your perversion. I swear to Christ, this was an actual debate that happened. I was there, I heard it. And for if no one else besides myself, I am going to avoid rehashing those arguments for a 23rd time. They come up every year, and they have for decades. So I'm going to go ahead and just link to some previous videos and some articles down below if you want to go into this subject in further detail. But the point is that the groundwork that led to the events I'm going to talk about today have been in place for a long time. So, what exactly happened? Why am I making this video? Well, Libs of TikTok doxed a BDSM event. I'm going to try to be really careful about this. I'm going to be blacking out the names of everyone involved. I'm going to be using a pseudonym to refer to the events and also the venue. You never know who's going to see a YouTube video, and the last thing I want to do is contribute to more harassment or harm. A courtesy that Libs of TikTok has no problem ignoring for themselves. So, I'm going to be calling the event in question the Birdhouse. Though, if you are in the city where this event takes place, you no doubt know what this event is. You might be wondering what prompted Libs of TikTok to notice such an event. As it turns out, the Birdhouse was using a local LGBT community center for its events. And this community center was due to get 7 figures of government funding to help with the renovation. So naturally, Raichik had to butt in and try to stop this from happening. On Tuesday, March 5th, she posted several screenshots with the following caption, quote, "Breaking! The Senate Appropriations Committee released a spending bill which is being voted on tomorrow. It includes $1 million of your tax dollars to go towards renovating an LGBTQ center in Pennsylvania, which boasts rooms to try BDSM and sex fettuccinis and hosts BDSM and sex kink parties. There's even a kink party happening there this weekend." At Senator Bob Casey and at Senator Fetterman, PA, are the ones who requested this funding. Absolutely sick that our tax dollars would fund this. Horrifyingly, the screenshots showed the location of the event clearly, along with a date for an upcoming party. Knowing how often her followers like to send bomb threats, I would be very scared for the safety of the event goers as well as the organizers. While she stopped short of listing the public names and faces of those who run the event, just knowing the name of the event and the location meant that information was a single Google search result away. I myself was able to find all of that within only 10 minutes of looking. And so, do you want to guess what happened next? Do you think that these amazing, supportive senators stuck up for their constituents against this fear-mongering and misinformation? No, they folded like lawn chairs. The same day, Fetterman's staff sent a letter, which was shared publicly, withdrawing support for the funds going to this project. It was a very diplomatic letter, and it didn't really give any clear answers as to why, but I think we can easily infer what was going on there. And then, to put icing on this crap sandwich, Elon freaking Musk, man who has cosplayed as Marquis de Sade, I am not kidding you, tweeted out in support of Raichik's actions, saying, quote, "Reality is getting crazy fast. Like, thanks for your contribution to this dialogue, you absolute freaking lemon of a man." However, I'm sad to say that this was about as pleasant of a response as could be seen to this post. most people rushed right into decrying these freaky perverts as terrible people, and how this was clear evidence of the corrupting influence of trans ideology and the gay agenda. Just really amazing stuff happening on Twitter.com these days. And Fetterman, being a different variety of lemon himself, went on to conveniently blame his team for the letter that was sent out. He did this all on the morning of the 6th, which was well after anything could actually be done about it. How nice. The distressed, rainbow-hued graphic read, "I do not believe that we should penalize this center based on events that are entirely legal among consenting adults. I have no problem with what consenting adults do in their private time. Unfortunately, at the 11th hour, my staff was made aware that funding for the center, which was in the bill because I championed it, would not pass in the fiscal year 2024 appropriations process. The choice was either to pull it or watch it get stripped out, attacked by Republicans, and ultimately killed. This is not the end of this fight, and I am going to fight for the center to secure their funding in the fiscal year 2025 appropriations process. I'm new here, but I wasn't aware that democratic values and priorities are dictated by Libs of TikTok." To paraphrase with what other accounts responded with, democratic values might not be dictated by Libs of TikTok, but yours sure seem to be. When you think about it, it's scary. A single Twitter account has the power to sway millions of dollars in government funding whenever she doesn't like something. When Libs of TikTok says jump, Republicans in Congress ask, "How high, ma'am?" Because our system is so messed up, to avoid endless filibustering and deadlock, everyone else just caves to their and her wishes. I sure hope Fetterman puts his money where his mouth is and secures that funding for next year. As long as the birdhouse still uses that event space, though, I doubt it'll really be possible. This is what happens. We have leaders who say that they will fight for us and our little community, but as soon as even a little pushback happens, they drop it. They say, "Oh, no, not this year, but definitely next year, though." They claim, "Well, the climate is just too difficult right now. You understand, don't you?" Or, other things simply have to be the priority. We can't waste our energy fighting for this thing. We need to be doing this other thing over here. Frankly, it is like listening to a long-term boyfriend who always says they want to get married and promises they will definitely propose soon. Once they get that raise or that promotion or finish their master's degree or pay off their student loans. And at some point, you just gotta wake up and say, "Yeah, right, buddy, if you mean it, let's go down to the courthouse right now." Realize they are stringing you along because they like the benefits you give them, but don't actually intend to follow through on their promises. But I feel like I have gone on for way too long about this analogy, so much so people are going to read into it. I promise there's nothing to read into there. It's just an analogy. Let's go ahead and talk about what I want to talk about next. So next, I want to discuss how Raichik framed this event and the subtle implications about the space that she is making, and how, naturally, unsurprisingly, you will find that almost all of it is totally wrong with just a little bit of research. Based on the screenshots shared by the Libs of TikTok account, you might assume that this is a kink party ran by and for the community center. And if you don't read the text closely, you might even be left with the impression that this is something openly done in the event space, where minors might see or even participate in the goings-on, because that is the kind of thing that Libs of TikTok generally will make content about. And that is the exact kind of fear that Raichik wants to instill. The kind of fear that the queer perverts want to turn your kids into perverts as well. That line of thinking. But no, thankfully, I believe that is not actually what is happening. And I did quite a bit of research to make sure I knew as much about this event space as I possibly could. I looked at current and archived copies of the Birdhouse's website. I looked at Facebook postings. I looked at Eventbrite listings. I read several locally published articles about the event space and its owners. And I even went back through a decade of posts on the group's FetLife page. This event has been around since 2011, so it does have quite a lot of history. So I think I can say what I am about to say with a degree of confidence, as much as I can, not actually personally knowing the space. In numerous places, it is clearly stated that this event is for 18 plus attendees only, and they check IDs. No minors. Moreover, the Birdhouse is not a subsidiary of the community center. It existed long before its current home at the center. It simply rents the space from the center once a month for a party. That is it. The two are so separate that the parties aren't even listed or mentioned on the community center's calendar, at least as far as I can tell. And do you know what programs are on the community center's online calendar? Peer counseling, recovery and sobriety support meetings, mental health support groups, lending library events. Truly evil stuff that doesn't deserve a dime of federal money. I mean, how dare they even ask for $1 million? Clearly, we cannot be funding stuff like this. Something else the website for the center shows is that there are numerous rooms in the space available for rent, for such uses as cocktail parties, theater viewings, conferences, classes, dinners, and so much more. It's fairly obvious knowing this that the Birdhouse simply rents the space like any other interested party. If you've been in the kink community in the US for any length of time, you know that this is fairly standard practice. It's extremely expensive to rent most commercial real estate in major cities, especially outright. And while that does happen from time to time, a much more common occurrence is renting rooms or venues recurrently. The actual business that openly operates in that space is often totally unrelated to kink. The event that wants to come in usually brings their own furniture, supplies, and cleaning equipment. So no, Raichik, I don't think that government money was going to be used to buy the queer people of Pennsylvania a new spanking bench. I know people who host events out of photography studios, galleries, meditation centers, yoga studios, dance halls, the back rooms of bars. As long as they've got the proper permitting, there's usually not much of an issue. This actually tends to result in parties that stay at one location for a lot longer. The few venues that are the special combination of things necessary to support a 100% dedicated dungeon 24/7 often get sold by the person who owns the property. I've known more than one dungeon in my time that was sold by the owner, so the site could be turned into a parking lot. Literally a parking lot. But anyway, the point is, nothing about this is shady or nefarious. It's routine, and the owners of a space are not responsible for what goes on at kink parties. But, okay, I am now going to try to be as charitable as I could possibly be on this topic. Maybe there is something weird about these parties. Maybe there's some other reason to think that they're really, really bad and that they taint any organization associated with them. Going through the website and event listings, it seems to be a pretty run-of-the-mill kink party, though. The cringiest thing is a description that can be found in the archived version of their site, which reads, "The Birdhouse is an improvisational interactive theater night focused on ontological deconstruction of the political theory concepts of contract and domination as put forth by Carol Pateman and Charles Mills. It often utilizes concepts that involve fetish as well as BDSM. And I could see why people would read this and roll their eyes into the backs of their heads. It is in fact cringe, but it isn't something that's found anywhere else. It's not listed in their events or on their FetLife or anything like that. So I have to believe, based on what else I know about this party, that this is, as the philosophers like to say, taking the piss. As far as I can tell, this is your bog standard dungeon play party, not performance art. Given, though, many dungeon venues are listed as performing arts centers, so maybe this is not so much a joke as legal butt covering. Otherwise, there's nothing else here that really raises an eyebrow for me. They say it's 18 plus, they say that there's no sex allowed, no obvious intoxication, no recording, no phones, no emission of bodily fluids, they don't sell alcohol, and genitals have to be covered in non-play areas. If anything, this is pretty conservative by the standard of events that I normally go to. But then again, I live in the lawless hellscape of Portland. I think this is a great example of how Libs of TikTok operates. She says, repeatedly, that this is a sexy sex party full of naughty, kinky, queer sex. Her audience repeats that in the replies. But if you even look at the photo that she posted, you can see right there that it says no sex, no fluids, no penetration. She is lying right to our faces and just expects us to ignore it because it serves her narrative better. And, by the way, for the record, in my experience, DMs are on top of rules like this, especially because it normally has to do with local laws and regulations, and it could easily lead to the place getting shut down if anyone violates that restriction. Something I am sure Raichik would never ever want to have happen. All it takes is one conservative enough law enforcement officer in the area to see her tweet, decide to take matters into their own hands, and then the whole thing is kaput. And considering how openly she posted the location and date for the events, I have to wonder if this is exactly what she's betting on happening eventually. Sadly, she's gotten what she's wanted before. She took 7 figures worth of federal funding out of the hands of a queer community center in need. She used Vanilla Society's implicit disgust of kink to do it. So I doubt she's going to stop here. It was always leading in this direction. It was never just about drag queens or queer teachers or books in schools or whatever layer of the far-right onion you find to be the most defensible. For people like her, she wants nothing less than the removal of what she sees as deviant sexuality from our cultural landscape. If it was just about minors, and just about not wanting stuff to happen in public view, why would she go after a private 18+ only event? Because it's not ever really just about those things. It's about her disgust towards anything spicier than intercourse after marriage to produce children. Anything else leads, naturally, to societal collapse and degeneracy. It has to be stamped out in her worldview, one layer at a time. First, they'll go after the officially permitted leather pride parades. Then it's private kink parties, and soon, I am sure, it'll be just random kinky folk minding their own business that she goes for next. It's a formula that's worked so well for her every other time. Why would she quit now? And this is why I say that solidarity is so important. Whether they're going after queer folk, or drag queens, or trans folk, or polyamorous people, or kinksters, they don't like any of us. An attack on one is an attack on all. Because if they haven't started gunning for you yet, they will. And your group might just be the next domino they want to topple. But I don't want to be all doom and gloom. I don't want to make it sound like it's something you need to be really scared about. But I would be lying if I said that I wasn't afraid for the next Folsom Street Fair, or that I wasn't afraid of what'll happen next to this little community event. So I think we all need to do our part to stay vigilant. Be prepared for people to start trying to film outside kink events, or sneak in and film things under the premise of citizen journalism. Keep in mind, we don't generally have things like security guards or cameras at our events. We don't really have a lot of strong defenses. Be careful about how you post yourself online and where you post. And now is as great a time as any to volunteer. Get involved. Start that munch you've been wanting to start. Go to that party. Enjoy these spaces where you can be yourself, because trust me, take it from someone who knows. They won't always be there. From what I can tell, the community center and the birdhouse are staying arm in arm through this, and they're supporting each other. That solidarity is huge, because it probably would have been easier for them to turn around and go, okay, get out, you're not welcome here, you're ruining our chances, you're ruining our funding, find somewhere else to go play. And I hope that that solidarity continues, but we can make it easier on them to make that choice. So please go to the links down below if you want to. I think that's where I'm going to go ahead and leave it for now, guys. Thank you so much for listening to this. I know it's a heavy topic. I'm going to try my best to not have every video be like super heavy, but that's the world right now, I guess. I don't know. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching. If you do want to have some more accurate BDSM and kink education, you can go ahead and subscribe to my channel. I try to make videos twice a week about all sorts of different kink and BDSM related topics. And finally, if you want to support what I do, the best way to do it is with Patreon. Link to that will be down below. Thank you so much for your support. And it means the absolute world to me. Stay safe, y'all. I'll talk to you again very soon. Bye.